I'm Tony Bendell. I'm one of the 3 speakers today who will speak to you about Lean and Six Sigma. This webinar is designed for young statisticians within the Royal Statistical Society, but anyone, of course, is very welcome to view it. So I'm going to start by doing an overview of the structure of the webinar and link to my 2 colleagues, Omar and Roland, who are both members of the Quality Improvement section of the Royal Statistical Society, who will also be talking to you specifically about Lean and Six Sigma. The Quality Improvement section of the Royal Statistical Society all share an interest in statistically based quality improvement and control approaches, and this is why the section was founded within the Society in the first place. As part of this, we have an interest in Lean and Six Sigma approaches, and our membership overlaps quite considerably with Technical Committee MS6 of the British Standards Institute. Now, the Technical Committee MS6 of the British Standards Institute, which I chair, wrote the ISO 18404 standard for Lean and Six Sigma certification. And the Royal Statistical Society, through the Quality Improvement section, is responsible for the certification scheme for ISO 18404. Under this scheme, the Society certificates Six Sigma green belts, black belts and master black belts, and the Lean equivalents, which are Lean practitioners, leaders and experts. And to do this, we run assessment centres, which looks at the body of evidence to show that a practitioner has the right profile in terms of meeting all the competencies based on what they've done over the last 3 years. As well as the certification of Six Sigma personnel and Lean personnel under the standard by the Royal Statistical Society, certification of organisations itself to be accredited by the United Kingdom Accreditation Service will be the basis of the approval of organisations as ISO 18404 certificated organisations. And the pilot arrangements for that are currently taking place. Certification of an organisation will be very similar to certification for ISO 9001 for quality management or ISO 14001 for environmental management. At this current time, the Quality Improvement section is also developing a course approval process to approve courses which are suitable for developing the competencies required for Six Sigma and Lean personnel under ISO 18404. And finally, QIS is responsible for the training and qualification of lead auditors from the UCAS accredited certification bodies who wish to certify organisations against ISO 18404. And I conduct those courses. ISO 18404 is a management system standard for Lean and or Six Sigma organisational implementation. And it's designed to make sure that the Six Sigma or Lean programme is implemented properly and that everyone understands and is working to the rules. It links the Six Sigma or Lean implementation both to the corporate objectives and strategy, makes sure that there's adequate resources to meet the objectives and has adequate infrastructure in terms of reporting, committees, approval processes for projects, etc. Also, it makes sure that there are adequate competent practitioners to meet the objectives set for the Lean or Six Sigma programme. Requires the organisation to keep up to date with developments in terms of changes in changing its management system, make sure that the organisation has measurable objectives and is monitoring whether these objectives are being met for its Lean or Six Sigma programme and taking corrective action if they're not. Make sure that the organisation has adequate documented procedures and records to support the implementation of Six Sigma and or Lean. And finally, that the organisation carries out internal audit and the organisation in turn is externally audited by an accredited certification body. Now, ISO 18404 was created because there is a very big interest in Six Sigma and Lean certification, as these extracts from Google Trends show. The scales, of course, coming from Google Trends are not clear, and they're very different between Six Sigma certification, which seems to be much greater, and Lean certification. But it's quite clear that in the case of Lean, people Googling for Lean certification are increasing. And indeed, for Six Sigma, that's the case as well. Although it looks more slowly, the scales are different, remember, on these very, very typical analytics. The standard was created also because there are problems about Six Sigma and Lean in terms of implementation around the world. They're very big and lucrative process improvement training and recognition markets, but they've been unregulated and there's been a lot of abuse. Many providers, some good, some much more suspicious, are currently certifying, and there hasn't been internationally agreed standards. Indeed, accreditation has often been offered by bodies that also certify, so they're kind of approving their own certificates. These are just some of the logos you will see if you Google Lean or Six Sigma certification. There's some reputable organisations in there, although perhaps a bit dated, maybe like ASQ, the American Society for Quality, but there are also other organisations which are much more dubious, perhaps, in terms of their basis. Indeed, on the top right, we have an example of a downloadable certificate where, in order to get certified as a Lean Six Sigma Yellow Belt, all you have to do is open the course. You don't have to complete it, and then you can download the certificate. The Yellow Belt level, you don't even have to pay for. The ISO 18404 International Standard, then, is a relatively simple standard. It's got the usual forward introduction, scope statement, references, terms and definitions that you find in all ISO standards. But there are three operational clauses, which are clauses 4, 5 and 6. Clause 4 defines the competencies for the key Six Sigma Lean and Lean and Six Sigma personnel, which are shown in the annexes. Annex A for Six Sigma, Annex B for Lean, and Annex C for Lean and Six Sigma combined, which is basically the sum of the two. Clauses 5 and 6 deal with the management system for running Six Sigma or Lean within the organisation. Now, the current position then on the rollout of ISO 18404 is that we certified the first Master Black Belts and Lean Experts back in December last year. A very exciting time, let me say, for myself and colleagues from QIS. The pilot organisation accreditation arrangements are now going forward, and we expect the pilot accredited certifications to take place in the UK in the next few months. Other certifications are scheduled in Sri Lanka and in Australia, and discussions are taking place in the US and with interesting companies, etc., across Europe. In the construction area, Lean Construction, the CITB has approved a project to apply the standard to Lean Construction with a company in Cornwall, Gilbert and Good. And separately, there's a proposal to Irish Enterprise to fund a big project in Ireland, again in the construction area, and again for Lean Construction. Most sectors have shown an interest to become engaged, including banking, construction, manufacturing, inspection services, etc., etc. I'll now hand over to my colleague Omar, who will talk to you about Lean.
Thanks, Tony. I'm Omar McCarthy, a global lead for Six Sigma with AstraZeneca operations. So in the section that we're going to go through now, I'd like to talk to everyone about Lean as the first element that we're discussing today around Lean and Six Sigma. So to start off, what is Lean? Lean, put simply, is about providing exactly what the customer needs when the customer wants it to the required quality as efficiently as possible. Lean is really about achieving the relentless removal of waste from all processes, as put by Tai Chiono. With regards to Lean, the Lean journey never stops, and it's more than just bare methods and tools. It's about a philosophy, culture, values, and way of thinking and working. So Lean goes beyond just the implementation tools. It's really about having that mindset embedded. So, where did Lean come from? Lean, as most of you will be aware of, has strong links to the automotive industry. And it really started with Toyota. So with Taichi Ono, who was a process engineer at Toyota, he was really interested in how Toyota could really overcome some of their challenges. So after the Second World War, Toyota was facing challenges with regards to being constrained by lacking resources. And one of the things they did was to travel to the US and carry out research to understand how they could go about driving improvement in their organization. So one of the things that Taichi was really impressed about was in his visit to the US and carrying out his research, he traveled to American supermarkets, and that's where he became aware of the pull system. And it was the pull system that really got Toyota started with regards to Lean. And this is something that they started to implement back in Japan in their factories, particularly in their machine shops, using the pull system and Kanban. In the middle of the slide, you can see the house. So Toyota and its Lean journey was very much centered around the house. At the base of the house, you can see phrases, a junker, which is about leveling, smoothing out, flow, standardized work, Kaizen. We have two pillars, just in time and Jidoka. And then in the roof, we have the goals, the why. Highest quality, lowest cost, shortest lead time. So the real essence of Lean and why Toyota was embarking on this journey was to really overcome some challenges. So it was really clear that there was a strong focus of, why are we doing this, as opposed to driving methods and tools. Moving on, Lean really centers around some key principles. And we refer to these as Lean thinking, the 5 Lean principles. So the first step, identify customers and specify value. So this is really about understanding what is important to the customer, what is value in the eyes of the customer, and what are they prepared to pay for. Next principle, identify and map the value stream. Visualize and understand the end-to-end value chain through methods such as value stream mapping. This is the key purpose here in this principle, is really understanding the end-to-end supply chain, not optimizing a particular step in the process, but really understanding the end-to-end supply chain to drive total value for the customer. The third principle, create flow by eliminating waste. Here it's about identifying value and being clear about what is actually value add and non-value add, and providing that platform to remove activities that prevent flow and drive increased value. Principle 4, respond to pull. This is really about acting to customer demand, using those triggers to pull product through the supply chain. So we don't manufacture, produce, or offer services unless it's that customer trigger pull to actually synchronize and drive production and flow through the supply chain. And the fifth principle is pursue perfection. So how can we continue to strive to be better and improve the processes by identifying and eliminating waste? Okay, so we've mentioned waste, we've spoken about value. So what do we mean by waste? So waste is something that the customer doesn't value. It's something that the customer isn't prepared to pay for. Value on the other hand, is something that the customer is willing to pay for example, an assembly process. Okay. The objective of understanding waste, identifying what's value for the customer, and identifying what's non-value adding is to drive the objective of minimizing waste and driving increased value for the customer. Okay, so identifying waste. There are several categories that are used to identify and drive out waste in the organization. And some of you may have heard of MUDA. MUDA is the Japanese phrase for waste that's used within Lean. And there are some classical models that we can use to identify and eliminate waste. So the 7 waste classical to MUD model describes 7 wastes, which are transportation, inventory, motion, waiting, overproduction, overprocessing, and defects. So transportation, it's really about avoid transporting materials about the workplace unnecessarily. Inventory is about how we can reduce inventory levels, hold just what we need to hold, and free up capital. Motion is about reducing the amount of motion that we spend in gathering items or searching for approvals to complete work. Waiting, how can we reduce the amount of waiting between the completion of the different process steps, whether it's machines or workers. Overproduction is really about how we can avoid producing more than we want to provide to the customer to meet the customer's needs. Overprocessing is about avoiding doing more work on an item which does not meet the requirements of the customer. So let's not work to specifically a too sophisticated level of detail when the customer doesn't care for it. And defects, how can we reduce and avoid faults, scrap, and bad quality? So the purpose of the 7 wastes is really to provide that framework when we're out in the organisation. How can we identify these different elements of waste to reduce them? And as I highlighted on the previous slide, drive increased value to the customer. So in essence, identifying waste and eliminating it is really about providing a way to do more and more with less, while coming closer and closer to giving the customer exactly what they want. Okay, so let's talk about one of the frameworks that's used to drive continuous improvement. So within Lean, one of the key learning frameworks that's used to drive continuous improvement is a process or methodology that we refer to as PlanDoCheckAct. And with PlanDoCheckAct, the first step in plan is about proposing theory to remove the waste, those items that are non-value add in the business. The do element is about carrying out controlled pilots or experiments to identify whether these new ways of working and standards can actually drive improved performance and efficiency and increased flow with the organisation. Check is about comparing the results of what we've received from the control experiments versus previous levels of performance to see, what we've expected to happen has actually happened. The 4th step is act. So how can we apply the learning and remove those non-value added activities to implement an improved way of working? Or, in some instances, if we haven't received the desired results that we expected to achieve, how can we go through another iteration of this loop to carry out additional experiments to drive and close the gap between that expected performance and the current level of performance? Now, PDCA is very important in driving waste out of the organisation and hinges very much upon using an approach around standards. Okay, so with PDCA, we go through the cycles of Plan, Do, Check, Act, and then we make good use of standards. So in driving continuous improvement, we go through these cycles, we set new standards, we lock in performance, and then we move through another iteration, PDCA. Okay, so I'm talking about the lean house, how it started with Toyota. I've spoken about lean thinking and the PDCA cycle. I'm now going to highlight that lean has a large number of tools that can be accessed within the toolbox. And the tools that we access, it's very much dependent on the why and the what. So why do we need to drive improvement? What's the overall strategy or the objective for the organisation? And what is it that we're looking to achieve? And dependent on those triggers and understanding of what's required, we can choose the right tools and techniques appropriately. One thing to note about lean, lean is not all about tools and techniques. So we can see changes over time in the way we actually lead organisations, from being a bit of a dictator leadership styles to empowerment to the lean style, which is more about setting example, showing leadership, and following and setting expectations about training people and coaching. It's about having a leadership approach that drives the right mindset and behaviours to continually improve and sustain improvements. So in driving lean, some things that are key, it's really key that we understand the why. If we understand the why, then we can create the right culture and environment. And through creating the right type of leadership, we can embed the right values and behaviours. By driving the right values and behaviours, we will align to the goals that will drive the right thinking and the adoption of the practice of the right principles within the lean framework. And adoption and practice of the right thinking will drive the use of appropriate methods, will in turn drive the expected results that we need to move us forward on that lean journey. So to recap, so what does lean give us? Lean tackles waste. We have the ability to identify and remove waste, becoming more efficient. However, without something called Six Sigma, we may be in the predicament that we produce at the same level of quality, but only just more efficiently. On the other hand, we have something called Six Sigma, which tackles variation and defects. But with Six Sigma, without lean, we produce better quality just as efficiently as we did before. We need to apply lean to a process to reduce complexity and be more efficient. So you can see from the two disciplines, the two sides of the coin, we actually need both of these, hence the emergence of Lean Sigma. So with Lean Sigma, we produce better quality products and services more efficiently. So the two are mutually beneficial to the organisation. At this point, I'd like to hand you over to Roland, who will talk to us a bit more about Six Sigma.
I'm Roland Caulcutt. I'm a statistical consultant. I have been for many years. And throughout my long career, the best work I have ever done was certainly within Six Sigma. So what exactly is Six Sigma and what does it offer? Well, here are three definitions. A disciplined method of using extremely rigorous data and statistical analysis to pinpoint sources of errors and ways of eliminating them. There's some truth in that. Those words were spoken by Harry and Schroeder, two people who worked for Motorola and wrote the first book about Six Sigma. But that definition is not entirely satisfactory. Here's another definition, also from Motorola. Six Sigma is a business philosophy driving behavior by making an organization's values explicit in its compensation system. So that is quite different to the first definition. They both contain some truth. A third one is from Minitab. Minitab software is used extensively by people who are attempting to achieve Six Sigma. Six Sigma is an information-driven methodology for reducing waste, increasing customer satisfaction, and improving processes, with a focus on financially measurable results. So, if you put all those three together, you're getting close to understanding Six Sigma. But it would be much easier for somebody who knows nothing about Six Sigma to visit several organizations that were doing it. And what would you find? You'd find that they focus on customers. Well, I should hope most organizations focus on customers. Of course, they didn't 50 years ago. These organizations focus on processes. If you focus on processes, you must focus on customers. It's unavoidable. This word process is so important, and I'll define it on a later slide. And they measure process performance. Measurement, of course, is where statisticians come in. They use the measures of process performance to reduce variability, reduce defect rates, and reduce costs. Maybe not all three at once. Now, this is extremely important. Within Six Sigma organizations, they have people whose job title is black belt. You'll have met that in the martial arts. It's a standard of excellence. And they're involved in process improvement, and they drive or lead process improvement projects. And they use a procedure called DMAIC. Define, measure, analyze, improve, control. We'll come to later. If this goes on for years and years, you may find eventually there's a management by fact culture throughout the organization. But managers will have seen the value of Six Sigma. So what is a black belt? Black belts are leaders of process improvement projects. And of course, they're found in companies doing Six Sigma. It's a way of managing, and it's been proven to increase organizational performance. It started in Motorola in 1987. It then moved to Allied Signal. Now, these are all large organizations in the USA. It spread to GE, which was the world's largest company at that time, and its CEO was a very famous person. I met it in Philips Electrical in Holland, a very large global company, and in ICI Paints in England. ICI does no longer exist, but it didn't fail, it was bought by others. So what is a process? It's a combination of people, equipment, and procedures that work together repeatedly to create benefits for stakeholders. And the stakeholders include customers, suppliers, workers, managers, shareholders. They all have a stake in the process. So at the end of a process improvement project, if none of these stakeholders have seen any benefit, then clearly the project has failed. So, improving the process. Well, at the start of a Black Belt project, obviously the performance of the process is unacceptably low in some way, otherwise we wouldn't be doing the project. Process performance can be improved, of course, by changing the equipment and or changing the people and or changing the procedures. Then else you could change. Equipment, of course, is very expensive, but engineers would see changing the equipment as perhaps the only way to improve the process. But changing the way people work can be even more effective. And people and equipment are being driven by procedures which include software. So maybe the most economical way to improve a process, look at the procedures. And of course, we mustn't spend so much money in making these changes that they outweigh the benefits obtained. So black belts do not have complete freedom to spend all the company's money on crazy ideas. Right. Now this is the procedure that black belts follow. I'm going to move to this box because this is the most important box. Improve the process. At that stage, you are implementing changes. The only way to improve a process is to change it. So at this stage, the improved stage, the black belt has put forward suggestions to management. If we do this, we will get this benefit. If we do this, we'll get this benefit. The manager may say, well, that's fantastic, but it's just going to cost too much. We'll go for this. If, after implementation, the improvement doesn't appear, of course, the black belt is in real trouble. So the black belt does not jump into the improved stage. The black belt gets involved in the measure phase. Now, in the measure phase, we measure the performance, the recent performance of the process, using a measure known as the primary metric, and there could be other measures as well. So this data, which of course is in a time series, because all processes repeat, is plotted as a time series, often with guidelines which convert it into a control chart, so that we can assess what the process has done recently. How close is it to meeting customer needs? Are there any changes in the performance that we don't know about? Having investigated what has happened in the recent past, in the analyze phase, we must find out why these changes have occurred. Why did bad things happen? Why did good things happen? Having done the measure phase and the analyze phase, the black belt is in a much stronger position to make sensible recommendations. Assuming the committed changes are successful, then we must, in the control phase, try to ensure that we don't waste them. We must sustain this new improved level of performance. But before we do any of this, of course, we have to define the problem. At this point, a document is created known as the project charter, which is a contract between management and the black belt. This is what we're trying to achieve. Unfortunately, this document and much of the discussion taking place is in a climate of ignorance. The black belt hasn't yet done the measure phase or the analyze phase. When he does, he may see that what's been handed to him is an impossible problem. So, in the early days, maybe the problem has to be redefined. So in these first three phases, no improvement is taking place. And managers are very impatient people. You've been on this job for 2 months, nothing has happened, they say. But the black belt must stick to the DMAIC procedure. It's been accepted at the highest levels and it must be followed. So, taking the bigger picture, we're trying to improve the performance of the whole organisation. It has been decided at a very high level that this will be achieved by improving processes. Not all processes, there are millions of them. We identify the important processes that need to improve. And this improvement work will be done by black belts, leading teams working on projects. So we need to train the black belts. And the training typically lasts for 4 weeks. It is a massive training. The commitment of senior management is absolutely essential. We're taking the very best people, aged 25 to 35, our high potential employees, taking them from the work they've been doing and putting them on 4 weeks of training. That's a lot of expense. So we have to select potential black belts, and each black belt coming on the training must have a project. And that project will be discussed throughout the training and progress will be made. Managers support projects. Hopefully, every black belt has a master black belt within easy reach. But in global organizations, easy reach could be thousands of miles away. Vital that managers are trained to know what black belts are trying to achieve and what support they need. And perhaps eventually, even managers will understand how to base decisions on data. So that's a typical project charter. This list is written in business language. I don't like it one little bit. Trainee black belts waltz around this list, changing it. Why is it necessary to express it in business language? Well, that's what managers like. I have an alternative project charter which says, what is the process? Who are the stakeholders? Which stakeholders anticipate getting what benefits from your project? How will you measure performance? And if the black belt can't answer these questions at the start, then clearly there's need for change. So, was there never any improvement before we had black belts? Well, of course there was. We had total quality management back in the 80s, in which senior managers said, everybody in the company is responsible for quality. We must all improve it. Well, it didn't happen. When things happen and we don't understand why, or when things don't happen and we don't understand why, we could see a detective. So here we are, think like a detective. These are employees. Every dot represents an employee. Why have they not been improving the business? Well, some of them have been trained at great expense. Many of them are highly motivated. Why is it not happening? In the green circle, we have all the people who are motivated. In the blue circle, all the people who have ability. And in the red circle, there aren't all that many people. They are the people who have the opportunity to do it. And you'll notice there are only 2 people in the intersection. So only 2 of all these hundreds of people are going to improve processes, because they are the only 2 who have the time in which to do it, and the ability and the motivation. Of course, this intersection could be empty. Right, here's a list of useful books, some about Six Sigma, some about Lean. All good books, we don't recommend bad ones.
Thank you, Roland, and thank you, Omar. I believe, audience, that you have heard a pretty good introduction to the Lean approach and to the Six Sigma approach, and you understand, I believe, what we in the quality improvement section regard as two of the most important methods within the framework that the quality improvement section represents. We in the quality improvement section believe that statisticians should be aware of and potentially engage with the use of statistical methods for organisational improvement and problem solving. These methods are very powerful, but they must be used right, and there has been some poor understanding and practice out there in the world. We believe it's a responsibility of statisticians to help users understand and use properly these methods, and that these methods can actually help them solve problems and make improvements to their organisations, which will not be possible without proper support in using these methodologies. We believe strongly that the statistical community should engage and help support good practice in these fields, and we're very committed to the new international ISO standard, ISO 18404, for Six Sigma and Lean, which allows certification of both practitioners such as black belts and master black belts or Lean practitioners, as well as, of course, ensuring that we continue this journey. We believe very strongly this is the right direction. So thank you very much for your participation.